So obnoxious.
Did they, is
Yep.
this, I know I think we've had this. Is this like a relatively new thing for Zoom that they added
Yeah.
the
Like a
voice?
couple months at most.
The voice.
Oh man, the voice.
I wonder how
mean,
they
it's
picked
just,
the voice. They're like, it should be a woman's voice. A
but like
soothing voice,
very robotic.
but not.
Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure there's an entire committee at Zoom.
Yep.
They have a DAO, an internal DAO that runs these
Yes.
Yeah, right.
decisions. Yeah, this last little jaunt was I didn't do it until like 2 hours ago. Because
So,
there's like some like I guess I'll just go into the psychology. There's like some trigger around like doing an assignment, like school stuff or whatever, and then like some negotiation with that. Like, all right, well, no teacher assigned me this, no person, like it was mutually agreed upon in a place that I was hanging out, and like I eagerly assented to it. So now what? Like, all right. So yeah, anyways, there was a bunch of like having to sort of negotiate this thing. And like sort of the place I landed with it was a little like, all right, so the concept of homework, right? Like in a versus, you know, something that I'm interested in doing that I play with, right? Like,
Home play.
yeah, home play effectively, but like it is moving a project forward in some way. There's like a machinery involved, right? It's not strictly like goof around time, but it is like,
Mhm.
anyways. So yeah, that's the meta play. I don't know if that helps get us into this thing at all, or if I just overthink things, but there we are.
I think in a way, at least like what you said last there, um, like it's not goof around time, but it is kind of reflecting back on the previous one too.
Yeah.
I felt the same thing. Is like, ooh, like this is kind of work now as opposed to like just like
Yeah.
yeah, it's not that like the requirements were like super explicit. In fact, they weren't. They were very open, but there was like a slightly narrower band of like things that I was thinking and considering, and like the reason that band needs to be narrow is that it connects to the other bands, and so that it kind of like fits into this like spectrum. And so I'm like kind of like, okay, there's a bit of like also the blind the thing that we haven't seen each other. I'm just like, am I doing it right? I don't know. Well, I can't even like status check, so let's just like keep on trucking forward and hope it works. But there's that like feedback loop that I kind of had at the first phase, was not there at all. And so that I think that was an element.
Yeah, I couldn't for the last one. I couldn't get. It was tough to start and then tough to keep that inertia going. But then by the time we posted and everybody had all their stuff up and you could like see what everybody else was writing and wanting to like respond to that, having to stop at that point, which I think we had said, or maybe I misunderstood, but I think there was a notion to not post for a little bit.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I wanted to post. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. My dynamic is with that was wanted to keep going, but like it's like being on stage or something. Like it's a stage fright. I love doing it when I'm up there, but the second I get off, I'm like, Jesus Christ, why the fuck would you ever do that ever? Like, so it's a dramatic sort of relationship. Yeah, the flip of that. Like, interesting. Yeah, there's a gate opening, and then like there's a room to play now, right? And then I think I have an anxiety response to that because I'm like, shit, you can do so much. So interesting. Oh, that's cool to hear.
I think it's frustrating to post the way we're posting though, knowing that there's like a better way, because that's what we're like trying to solve. So I get like all like, wow, like I just want to be able to do it in a way that feels more organic, like especially like the making connections between things, and this feeling like I'm like working in like my like stack of like tools is just like, it's like there's so many different things and I keep bouncing between different tools, which sometimes irritates me because I want it to be in one place, which I don't know if will be solved by what we're trying to do. So I want to keep posting more, but it feels like every time I post, I do it a little bit differently. So I kind of enjoy this sort of like step back. Let's look at what we're doing. Is there a way to move it along as far as, yeah, codifying it in some way? Like how far are we from that? It sort of feels like going back and forth between that sort of content and process.
I think, I don't know if we want to kind of start jumping in, but at least like to me, Kristen, you saying that reminds me, like in reading your post and looking at the structure, like to me that became like pretty like plainly obvious to me, because initially you started out doing a lot of linking, and that kind of like fell off towards the end. It's because it's like almost so much of a burden to do all of that, and then you also seem to be taking it from Rome and like into there. And so I feel like there's like this aspect of like lost or missing connections in a way. I can tell like there is more context and I would be able to jump and dive deeper, but it's not to the point where I can actually like click that thing and go see it. So I kind of wonder, like, are we just like, are we running into the same thing in a way that like Rome is trying to solve, is just like ease of access to this like information in a connected manner? And like how do we achieve that better? Like how do we make these connections like as easy as Rome does to some degree, without like completely just ripping it off entirely? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, but doing it decentralized is like the big difference with Rome.
So
I tend to like, I did this most recently again with the Fig Jam document that I created. Like I can spin up an instance of like, this is what it's like to be in this kind of system and making connections these ways. And then I leave like, it's like cliffhangers. It's like, here's where this could insert, like research on this. Here's where that could insert. And then I just drop it because I'm like, it's so much fucking work to get it all in there. Cause like, I've got a bunch of stuff in Rome. I've got a bunch of stuff in other notes. They don't really like, what's the use of having it in one place if it takes that much effort? Is sort of like what goes through my mind. Do I want it in one place? What would I do?
There was also a feeling of I started like by reading on my phone all 10 posts, just to kind of like refresh myself and get it lay of the land. Then I also, apologies for the post, I'm extremely agitated currently. Then I went to my notebook, so by hand, just kind of like squishing things apart and like trying to like make a little bit of sense of it. And then I had something, and then I started doing it in like Rome for my bullet interface. But then I'm like in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, so I'm still going to take the first like paper stuff and this and turn it into Markdown, and then like keeping in mind that I'm going to need like images are going to be embedded that way, so I'm going to need to like send myself the file. It's like all of this like extra stuff. I'm going to need like a section of time at the very end simply for conversion and Markdown. And I mean, it's a like very small amount, so it didn't really like affect how much I did. But there was this feeling of like, even if I use a block reference within Rome, can't really like convert that over to Markdown without like a lot of work. So I'm just going to try to constrain like my medium to something that's relatively easy to convert. But I think it's just like, I want those connections as well. I want to be able to make like map things, and I just can't. And so, but that awareness is there, and it's just constantly just like, this could be like this, and I could have like those verbs, and I just don't. It ends up being a little frustrating.
Does Rome have any export format right now?
3
Markdown, JSON. Yeah, what else?
EDM, which is like their native metadata, like complete JSON. So JSON plus extra metadata.
Got it.
But you have to like, out of the raw data, you have to rebuild all the backlinks yourself. Basically, they may have pointers, but without some custom software, like it's just a pile of data.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's basically the lack of interoperability of existing media types.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think or what I was trying to do with the like analysis on CJ's stuff, like speaks to this. Just, I don't know, I started to like just tree out like a rough structure for like templating, I guess, or a model for the sort of post type structure, I guess, with a mind to like the relational quality of like being able to record a lot of stuff. So, you know, time and space and nearness to people and what those relationships look like. And then when you have all this bound up, and then that might be a starting place to talk about how you would distribute this, like in a structure, I guess, like how it would work where there isn't a centralized control of the information. Yeah, I guess how the feed structures or whatever. That's how I was kind of thinking about it. I don't know if that's helpful or it's, I mean, we'll see, I guess.
Do we want to jump in as like a starting point? Dave can kind of kick us off. So Dave and I were just talking, we went for a walk, and so like what I did just process wise, just this is a short story to focus in on what are we doing right now and like how are we sharing what we created or what our analysis was. So I went through and did similar to John, like read through and was taking like basically like tallying up different formatting of like within Sharuz's posts, and then did like another layer of analysis where I pasted that in Figma and like wrote notes, and then I was going to do a video just to explain like what I did. And Dave is like, he's like, wait, there's a presentation like aspect. I was like, no, there doesn't have to be like a presentation, like you can do whatever you want, but we did decide on like a 5-minute, right? Like, okay. So I think like the way I had conceptualized it in my mind is everybody has basically 5 minutes for how they want to structure how people consume their thing. So they could talk for 5 minutes. They could be like, here, read my stuff. You've got 5 minutes to read, or here's a video that's 5 minutes. I don't know if that works, or people were thinking the same thing. I'm curious if people were thinking differently.
I definitely took it as an implication that there was some presentation to be done. So I went in that direction a little bit.
Maybe you blocked it out, Dave.
I almost certainly did.
Because you didn't want to do it.
I'm like, presentation, why would you ever do that?
And then I was like, but you talking about the thing, which you would have done anyway, is just,
yeah.
I'm like, you've already been planning on it. You just didn't know maybe that it was a presentation.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I just blacked out because the concept of presentations terrifies me or something. Anyways.
Yeah. We definitely didn't use that word, I don't think, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I would have probably disagreed vehemently. It's perfect. It works fine. Like, yeah, I mean, the style of I mean, we can just present the damn things and go from there. I don't know how I'm going to present mine if somebody else wants to go first. Or I can go, I don't.
I mean, I guess if you don't want to go, I can go. I guess technically Kristen wrote an order and I was first. So I can do that. I will bring up a PDF.
Ooh,
Kristen,
a
could you
PDF.
Kristen, could you give me? Yes.
I don't know why that's an advanced sharing option, but I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little strange.
Don't question Zoom. Zoom gives us connection. You don't question Zoom.
It is the substrate.
It is the in between.
Zoom is mother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if this works. I need to do some system preferences here.
Yeah. Show your screen and then you can watch you type your password.
I have to leave the chat apparently.
So, see you around.
Bye.
I should have just gone first.
Fine.
Now we have
Flashbacks to speech class.
Yeah.
The ever present, like, no, I don't want to go. No, I don't go. I should have gone.
Yeah.
Even like that, when there's formal meetings where it's people have to introduce themselves, like I hate that. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
just
like, I
like
don't know, like how do I
palpable,
describe who
like,
I am? Yeah.
Discomfort.
Okay. Let's see. Will this work?
Mm-hmm.
You can see the screen. Beautiful.
Yep.
So I guess actually, so Kristen and John, you both kind of talked about your process. My process was quite similar. I basically opened up all of your links. I did an analysis on Kristen, by the way. So I opened up all 10 tabs, and then I just sat with my iPad in front of me like, okay, I guess I'm going to go through this now. So actually I started more on this left-hand side with like post structure, and I kind of just went and like, okay, there's this context piece. It was a piece of text. There's like a change log. I started with sections and stuff like this, and I turned it into like, okay, this is a list, meta test. This is a list. This is text, section, list, what it contained, like all these different things. This is kind of trying to get an idea of what the structure of the post was and like find commonalities between them. Like some of them were, I mean, like, whoa, wow. Found context immediately in every single post. And like, for the most part, it was like text and images. So I was like, great. The context seemed to be like one of the more important pieces of information, because like, to me, that was metadata is how I was looking at it. So then on the side, I kind of just tried to give a little bit of description of the context of each post. Again, so I could pick out the pattern between all of the different contexts. So eventually what I kind of came up with was, this is like the general or like common structure for everything, starting with the file name. And I think all of us adopted the same file name structure once one person had it in. I think Kristen was the first, maybe John, I forget. But that ended up just being like 1.markdown, 2.markdown, all of this. Next was the title. I guess there's a little bit more to the title than what I put out here, but I thought like one of the most important pieces for me to understand was 04.01 meant game number 4 and post 1 inside the game. At first, I didn't understand what this was, and like on the website, it was like all jumbled up. So like being able to pick this out and being like, oh, like these have this order was quite helpful in the title. On the navigation of each page, there's this like small little header block. Let's see if I can pull it up. On all the posts, that kind of gave you that this is part of game 4 and it is a certain post. And then the context, I think, was really, again, the most interesting piece. So I found the commonality between them. They were of quite varying lengths, varying paragraph numbers, what they were even about. Sometimes there's 2 sentences, sometimes 3, 4 paragraphs. And I thought it was generally like where Kristen's feelings and headspace were coming into writing that post, like where you were and whatnot. And I found it to be pretty unique. And being full text based, it's very different than like a bullet pointed list that I did, kind of a thing. But I think they provide very similar information overall, which I found interesting. And then the content was like a few different types, or really mix and match of different types. So I'm curious, like how Dave is kind of gonna get into this too, or anyone else, like with the lists or like blocks of text or photos and links in particular. Those were like the 4 main ones that I noticed. And then I just had this little tiny write up here saying this is mostly text content, really densely with links initially. And some of those links, or like basically, as I said earlier, were like Rome and stuff like this. And it would be nice to have that context out, or even context within, like there was the @ links for people, and even things like that I imagine got pretty tedious pretty quickly. But I think that's really all that I have, like from the like structure point of view. I'm curious, Kristen, if you have like any other thoughts or anything that like I might have missed that you like intentionally were structuring.
No, I don't think you missed anything. Like we did a similar thing. So I'm like starting to make some notes, because like where I sort of focused in on for Sharu's was the content, and I counted everything as content, even though he had a few sections like akin to context that were his like own unique, like here's like his meta reflection was like a little guy. So that was kind of like his context a little bit. So it's just interesting seeing similarities in how we approached the analysis. Yeah, I don't think you missed anything.
Cool.
Dave is doing his grimace and like thinking about things. I don't know if anyone else has anything that came up for them.
I think probably just showing what I did.
You want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah, and then unless anybody else has anything, like
I
that's
just want
what.
to say,
Yeah.
definitely like the fact that all the media types you broke out, like context versus content and all of that. Like I didn't quite go that granular, but I could totally see that, and it really like drives home the remixability aspect of it. That they're all just like combinations of these elements.
Yep. Yes. That specifically combination of the elements. And so I was telling Dave earlier, I'm getting frustrated, like with their frustration seems to be the key, with the lack of language to explicitly talk about what we're doing, because I start cycling through a bunch of different words. I'm like, it's a primitive, it's a type, it's a media type, it's a, yeah, form, like there's all the, and I'm just like, what is it? I was like, is that something different? Because Dave uses the word primitive a lot. Am I saying the same thing? So
Yeah,
I think we're starting to hover around something, which is cool.
yeah, I did some work on that, letting terminology arise in like just doing a process of folding, basically. I mean, this is what I did. I guess I don't really have anything to share, like other than the link that I put in Telegram. If you want to look at that, you don't have to.
Cool.
Yeah. I started here on this big notepad.
You should take a picture of that.
Yeah, I will, and I'll put it in the post.
Yeah.
So basically, I went through CJ's posts and sort of skimmed them for content, like if it was in an RSS reader or something like this. So I sort of mimicked that behavior at first to get like a 30,000 foot view of what was going on. And then started at the initial post, and like just did a content breakdown, like to get the overall structure of a post, I guess. But that was less important to me than like, the specific content and how he structured it, because that's so variable as to be, idiosyncratic effectively. So that's a block of blocks, right? And there is logic on how each of those blocks will be formed, the primitives that make up the like sort of container of media and stuff. And it sort of, I put that sort of at the bottom, medium artifacts in the Buzzard post. So had that feeling, and then sort of moved out into like just moving through each post and like creating this list of like consistent like metadata types, I guess, right? And I'm sort of just I'm rolling through this and then writing them out and sort of finding commonalities and feeling into like, I have some of this stuff in the process, basically like, it's sort of like play acting the media. Like, what if I wanted to be related to this person? What if I wanted to, you know, like where, if I was in time, how many places would I need to sit and write one of these things? And what are the variables on that, right? Like, so I'm sort of trying to embody like potential tendrils of a data structure. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like, you know, it's a sort of persona work. And the mentality that I was using when I was capturing the metadata was assume a world where a lot of like the technical stuff will be able to be automatically captured, right? Like GPS, UTC, like all of the standard stuff that assuming a lot of sensors, right? And having that stuff be, you know, streaming in somehow. I don't know what that relationship is like, right? Like, but, you know, so what is the other layer? Like, we can do that now, right? So what is the other layer of information that would help like these things be relational? So this is where, you know, the title, should it be headless or not? Like width is the like interpersonal relationship layer. This has something to do with the trust layering, right? Like how you want to reveal who you're with and to whom, right? And what the nature of that relationship is. Like, is it it's like, it's collaborating around a type of thought is kind of the model that I was using for this. Anyways, I can go through all of these specifically, but like, I don't know what the novel, like, yeah, so the time is basically the concept that you can work on something in a session over multiple sessions, basically, right? And that that encapsulates some part of the artifact. The location is, you're collecting this information in some like sort of geographic flow so that like you have information later to do comparative analysis on where people were in relationship to the thinking that they're doing, I guess. I don't know. Is that something that we care, like, right? And then, yeah, I think moving to the media type, like this is the media primitives that Kristen was just talking about. And I think CJ, you were mentioning like the instantiations of like a JPEG container of video or whatever, and then like what the metadata around these kinds of things are so that they can stick together and how they relate to blocks, probably. I don't know if this is some stuff there. And then this information is useful in queries, I think, right? So you have file types, right? Which are just like, this is an image, but like here, the relational aspect of this stuff that would create a sort of metadata membrane around these pieces of media are like sort of purpose or intention or something like this. Like it's a sketch or it's an idea or something. I don't know like how you capture this kind of thing. This is how I'm thinking about it though. Anyways, I don't know. Then one of the other things that he had in there was navigation. Like you manually linked up with some stuff, right? And then, so like that's saying like these posts are in series or whatever, but if we had like sort of game metadata, we would have that automatically, right? So that you could spit that out into the page. So like part of this is like what amount of navigation is being bubbled up to the surface visually for like wayfinding usage versus like query fodder, like so that you can manually like sort of follow your nose through it, and like how are we encoding the concept of navigation versus relationship and all that? I don't know. And so yeah, anyways, that's, I don't know if that helped at all. Yeah.
No, it helps. I'm
Yeah.
making notes. It's interesting, the navigation thing being relational. So
Yeah.
part of what's like starting to emerge, and this is similar to what I was finding too, is there's content that can be organized into something like structural. There's content that can take form, and then there's relationship between, and there's different processes that you can take in order to understand and feel into that structure somehow. So like I thought it was interesting, like you were mimicking an RSS reader and then you were play acting as pieces of content. So like that's useful to understand like how you got into it. It sort of brings things to life a little bit.
It's a way to humanize the relationship to the computer, right? Like you're, I mean, and I'm attempting to be like a, I don't know, archetypical representation of the like sort of generalized form of a human interacting with all of the potential types that come into that. And if any of those things are like sort of unbalanced towards the machine, like that like, so that like it would assume something of human behavior that is unlikely, meaning like, you know, description has to be put in every time you make one of these. It's just not going to ever happen, right? So like what I'm trying to do is like, all right, so there is this sort of being that exists in relation, and that is our super user foil. And what is the type of ethos of this person? What are they likely to do? How can they be rewarded in system? And like, what is the type of information that they need to, you know, push into this thing? So it's this movement into like, okay, if they value relational information, that's a given, right? It means that the collection of relational information is valuable in the system because it's going to afford them some power, right? So coming up with mechanisms to store and collect that metadata like gives me the problem space, right? So, and particularly what I'm better at is if we need to collect a type of metadata that we know is valuable, but we can't figure out a way to get that metadata, I tend to like to make schemes to collect it. So in the case of something like contextual awareness about a piece, you know, so say somebody's doing a sketching session and maybe built into the flow of making that sketch, if we're building software to do it, there is like a sort of question and answer mentality to remind as part of the process to contextualize it. And like, what is the simplest or easiest way to get that to happen? Like, can you do it with a voice note? Does it like, hey, it seems like you're winding down on this thing or you're about to close it. Like, what is a simple question or prompt or something like that to contextualize the information so that, and then now we can store that metadata in some form or whatever. So anyways, that's part of what I was doing and trying to lay that stuff out.
Have you guys seen any, or go ahead.
Oh yeah, just the idea of it being like, oh, do you want to add something to this? Like you are creating something, but also I'm keeping in mind like the meta level, and I will like, you know, sort of offer that for you. I mean, I think that's a great pattern. Gotcha.
Got a little clippy in the corner.
It's what it is.
There was a software developer who I think worked on like Facebook timeline, like early on when it was still kind of a big idea. And he built software after leaving Facebook. I think it was called Datum, D-A-T-U-M. But it was basically like every hour it would ping you with the push notification that would prompt you with some questions. And then it would also ambiently collect a bunch of information like your geolocation, what the weather was like, the time that you actually opened up the notification and answered. And it would rotate through a bunch of different things. And then every year he would put out these like really gorgeous, like 20-page books of just like infographics of like everything that he was up to that year, you know, like big pie charts of like, here's who I spent the most time with, or here's the situations that I was in the most, or my mood, or what I ate, or it's just a cool thing to visualize like what seems like an insane amount of scale for information to be collected about one person, he actually keeps doing year after year, and then packaging it into something that's like fun to look at. And
Datum.
And it's like physical, it seems, which is a really cool angle.
Yeah, he would sell the books every year.
Yeah, something you could put on the coffee dresser, like, or coffee, like there's a lot of digital data just like disappears, and you can't really memorialize it. I mean, this seems like a really interesting way to do that and like compress it at a pretty massive scale.
Yeah, I think that there's a component of that, like quantitative self aspect, and the visualization of that is usable to people who don't have the sort of disposition of doing that level of collection, right, and organization. Like, I don't like doing it. It makes me feel crazy, but I love having access to the understandings that it affords. So like there's this tension there, right? And I appreciate, like, that book would be fascinating to me, right? But the likelihood that I could find myself in a position where I would be able to collect that type of information to even have the, to do the, and that's the thing, depending on the personality type of, somebody who's more quantitative would want to look at this stuff in a certain way, and somebody who's more qualitative and relational would want to look at it in a different way. So I think that there are some like visualization patterns in here and what we're talking about that like, or the visualization patterns will be developed if this information can be collected and like harnessed in some way, right? Like, and if you can do that, generally people, they will just gravitate to like, oh, I could make this look like that, right? Like, because clearly the patterns are in there. So yeah, like the knowledge work thing is interesting with this, because you have people who are like in an environment where they're incented to collect information about a specific topic area, for both the fun of it and the understanding of the world, right? So you have a built-in sort of curiosity mechanism and like market opportunity as well, which is a good place to sort of work these models out, I guess. Anyhow, sorry if I took us too far afield there. Yeah.
So you wouldn't do the thing like a datum project because it's too burdensome on the data collection, basically, or that it's too consistent? Like, I'm just curious, Dave, what your...
So my experience with this is there are people for whom they have like scientific disposition, like they enjoy the study of data, and the collection of data and the processes of scrubbing and all of the things that you need to do good science, right? And some consumer products like the Apple Watch and stuff or whatever are putting faces on like measurable health data, and then sort of doing algorithmic review and response, creating sort of game cycles of like, controlled data stuff. And it's symbolic, right? Like, this is what their designers spend all this time doing, creating a design language to represent a bunch of a data stream, right? Like, and that is telling you something about, it's not like you have to figure out what it's telling you, right? More or less. But so there's a lot of room to do versions of that, right? Like, and you can rely on certain types of people, knowledge workers in particular, to spend the time with more complex forms, right? And also build tooling to like expose and share and do all the stuff with the complex forms or whatever. But and anyways, I think that there's an interface that I would particularly use if it were connected to the process of my thinking, right? Because I am, it's sort of, I wrote something about this earlier, like a thinking process management industry thing, whatever tool set.
So do you see Buzzard then as something, or relational OS as something that could help populate that data set?
Help get offered definitions, or at least propose, like be part of a community that is proposing standards and development along a certain line that would allow this to be possible in the open. And then we have opinions on that and software that we could develop as a way to move that work forward, right? And if there's value in doing this, which I believe there is, like if there is value in collaborating at large with people to create games that create knowledge, that sort of mind consciousness for knowledge, whatever, there's a lot of potential in that, like laterally too, into entertainment, into pedagogy, into governance, into whatever, like anywhere that there are groups of people attempting to think in a swarm. This is a sort of framework to allow people to build software on top of that, like those styles of thinking, right? And they can be very creative, they can be very, but they are collaborative by nature. Like the organizational structure of the underlying code and protocol is collaborative, right? Like if you try to run like sort of very competitive code on the system, it should break in some way, or it shouldn't, it should, it's not disallowed, but it's balanced somehow. Anyway, so this is, yeah, like, and can we get this into a standard form or a communication style that is enough for other people to sort of pick it up and play with the form and like start creating artifacts like we're doing, that have like some potential for navigability and legibility and are shareable or something. Or it may be just in the short run, just doing this, like just trying to find like commonalities and relations between information is fun enough to let that game surface lets forms emerge naturally. And then you have a game that sort of like, that's one. Like rather than trying to dream them up from the get-go. I don't know. This is, yeah.
I think I'm following. I see Buzzard or relational OS as a way of populating the data to form a quantitative self, maybe based on qualitative information. Like you just contribute what you want and someone might reflect that back. Like there might be tooling that emerges to allow you to turn it into something quantitative. Someone might, turn it into a visual representation. Yep. Creating tooling to do that. Yeah.
It's like the underlying representation of that, so things can be built on top of it that are more forward facing. But that the whole thing in and of itself, I think both aspects are very related to each other as well.
Yep.
In the sense that it needs to be flexible enough to have multivariate forms of visual representation on top.
Yeah, and you can choose how you want to look at certain data sets too, based on ways that people have designed like lenses to look at the data.
And then the features within that too, because I think the way we've been working so far, at least, and I guess with the name being relational OS, there's kind of a messaging or communication aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know, I'm already picturing like clients that are like, this is where I post because it has the best posting UI, but then here's a client where like I can go and message and discuss because it has the best UI for that.
Yes.
Yeah. And all of that information is being encoded in the same sort of relational methodology, right? So like, then you could have just purely sort of viewport access that give you like toggles to look at different streams of this stuff, right? Yeah, like, sort of people can come up with lenses effectively, like query systems, these kinds of things. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, then you have like little browsing networks too. You create a browser for a sort of area of the network, and it can ingest in formats that like you all agree upon, so that you're like looking at a similar type of form, if that it is a coordinating function that you want as your. So yeah, I mean, it's the internet again. It's just it's like a hypermedia version of the thing. It's a conversational network more than it is like because the relational quality of this is communications based, and the style and form of the communications can be entertaining to densely informational, right? But they're all collaborative. Like you are, so yeah, then there's money built in here somewhere because we can do that now.
And it seems like they don't exist independently either. Like, even if it is like a piece of entertainment, like that does not exist independently of any other things. Like now you have people writing about that piece of entertainment or where that piece of entertainment is derived from. Like all the things that, like, is it a commentary on society? Like, the artist saw something and like, this is the representation of what's coming out.
Yeah.
Nothing exists in a vacuum. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's go ahead.
Real quick, like what Tita just said, what I visualized was like, if there's like a movie that's divisive and you want to go and read comments or reviews on it, but you can filter by the people that were like fans and they're going to be amped about it, and that's what vibe you're into, or people that are going to hate on it. I don't know, just I guess it's kind of like the lens thing, but more specifically on a specific post.
Yeah, it's being able to move through filter bubbles of your own accord. Like, and then having people potentially be able to build those things, like, ideally the value is in, I mean, yeah, I don't know. You could build all sorts of crazy nonsense on this. I don't know how you can't prohibit like sort of market capture of this stuff, but ideally if the structure allows for like people to sustain like with payments and stuff, then the likelihood that you can get like rapid market growth or whatever becomes lower. Anyways, that's an aside. Yeah, we don't need to go into market stuff. Like there was something with anyways, I'll drop it. too much reading of that debt book. Yeah.
The terminology like moving through filter bubbles is interesting to me. In a way, it makes me think of moving through different aspects of our collective consciousness, and exposing different aspects that maybe, I guess, like I would like to be able to see different perspectives and have those on the surface level. I could see it being used for the opposite reason as well, but being able to look more in depth at just different viewpoints or different queries people have placed and what that kind of shows up as is, I don't know, it just seems extremely valuable and like interesting.
Yeah, okay, so the structure that I'm thinking with here, and then maybe we can bat this around some, that would make that like workable, right? So that like, how do you mediate the exchange between like a perspective that you've got and a perspective that I've got? This is, again, I'm assuming that we can create some technological interface or interfaces that allows information to come into a system and then be distributed through some network or whatever. Like the skills exist out there to make that a fluid process. We just have to fill them in. So where was I going with this? The to what end and with whom like is a big part of this. And the sort of structure of people that are doing the relating, I have sort of globbed around the idea of like small swarms, you know, to like, you know, a swarm size, right? Squad to swarm is sort of the size there. And I don't know what the upper end is, but the lower end is, you know, probably 2 or 3, or, you know, but probably best in the 6 to 12 range, you know, sort of a group of people. And then there are different dynamics as you get bigger. But that sort of coordinating, like, okay, there's a trust bubble there, right? Of people who can pretty fluidly communicate, like they're pretty aligned on where they're working, like, and what they're trying to discover. Through the process of doing this, they are learning about, they're growing in some way, right? So, okay, that's a great, you know, it's not like Slack where you're like in a room and you fucking talk to each other, or god damn it, you do that. You know, it's people are volunteering into these sort of things because it is part of some creative work or something like this. So like, what are the dynamics and what can be expected from that, and like how does scale work, and like, you know, there's the sort of, and like what is the idealized case here is that this layering of software, or this style of software, can produce collected works, collaborative works, that are not individualized necessarily. The individuals within the collaborative, through the use of this like platform, are having their individual works like sort of registered into the system, right? Which it provides like an accounting system of sorts to like distribute payment fairly, right? And there are going to be different models of that, obviously, but this allows the collaborative as a whole to offer artifacts to the market and to the public, or however that is mediated, without individual mediation. So you can distribute the pressure of offering product and entertainment and voice and all of this other stuff over the surface area of a stronger collaborative, which allows them to work at a higher level of complexity and within trust, and sort of expand a sphere of influence. So the unit here is this sort of swarm like collab, whatever the hell it is. And the data represents that, because there's this inner moving between the thought to create an emergence. Whereas in a sort of individualistic system, you have your silo and you make stuff in that silo, and then you hand it over to someone else's silo. Or now you have yeah, I don't know. You have a collective silo in Figma, but it's not connected to fucking anything. Like, you have to export it and put it into it. So I don't know if that, I don't know what any of this is, but maybe
it's
some
definitely
of it
a shape to all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's getting clearer.
Okay.
Yeah, so the hypermedia communications network is like a swarm, like that is populated by a swarm of people, basically, is what you're saying.
There's a hyper conversation in the world. There's a zeitgeist, right? Like, there is things pop up. We're all talking to each other, right?
Yep.
So there's a way to.
It behaves in swarm, like,
yeah.
when you're designing, you're trying to constrain it for swarm-like behaviors and interactions, which this is the stigmergic stuff.
Yeah, there are patterns and flows of information, which means that and they're detectable, we can read them, right? Like, you know, oh, that person, I keep seeing a lot of people wearing this kind of clothes, you know, and then you offload this into the market all the time, like Instagram, and they'll just feed you ads on what to do. But you can do this without that, right? Like, we've done this forever. So the information landscape is just massively populated. It is so dense. It's a big, gigantic ocean, whereas it used to be a trickle before. And so now we have the technological layer and the democratic access to this information. So there are conversational fields happening out there between people who are interested in things. They are looking at similar data. They are like moving down certain paths. But currently the like sort of market mediated informational networks that we have do not give two fucks about that, because they are meant to sell you things, which is fine. That's fine. That works. But there is an entire layer of untapped like informational gold and like thinking and you know, creativity and all of this other stuff that like market methodology can interface with but not mediate, because it seeks to commodify everything. So you know, anyways, so this hyper conversation can be legibilized, but it should be done so in like a medium that is like sort of in alignment with the world right now, which is this networked, decentralized, commingling, you know, nomadic, everybody's sort of bouncing off of each other and like has a malleable self, right? So like, you don't know who you're going to meet and how and like where they're from and all this other stuff, but you may have very like aligned viewpoints, right? So like, how do you manage these relationships? How do you show up to each other like in even a tangible, visible form, like on the internet? Like, what does that profile look like? How do you, like, what is this other entity, right? And then how do you interface with that entity? Like, there are all these conversational tools and, you know, visualization type of things, and yeah. I'm real high-minded right now. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, the media can't, or the market can't mediate the swarm, but it can work with the swarm output.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yep.
If you have market forces in your swarm, it'll just tear itself to pieces. Like it is, you can do that for certain types of very short-term, like highly competitive endeavors, like crazy max output, or if you're trying to be funny, because there's a bunch of crazy status hacks you can do with this kind of stuff. But for longer-term, deeper efforts, like the kinds of things that have like an innate, like we talked about this with Heidegger, like something that differentiates an object from a thing. Like an object is just material. You can quantify it. You can, you know, measure everything about it. A thing has a like sort of divine spark or a soul, right? So like, yeah.
Well, and I think what is going on with the swarm, and we're trying to put just constraints or boundary on so that the swarm can do what it needs to do within that space, is less structured than what the market requires in order. It's a commodification of being, basically. And the swarm, you don't want to commodify it, you want to let it just do its thing.
Yeah.
Because people, I mean, I got the hypothesis is that, and this is playing out with a lot of the Web3 stuff, is that people can work together with less commodification, just give them some structure.
Yeah.
And then they'll produce things that can then interface with the market in certain ways. It's like a building approach.
What do you mean by commodification within collaboration? Is that in terms of output or methods?
I think both.
Else?
Because like part of the swarm mentality, or just the, like even not necessarily swarm, but individual actor in a swarm, it's allowing for an autonomy to create how you know to create and how it makes sense for you. And then trusting that when you do that in the context of a bunch of other people doing that, that it will all connect somehow without, it's sort of like, what's the deductive versus inductive? Is that what the two, like reasoning, like putting structure on something versus like letting it emerge, like
and just
yeah,
coming as whatever feels natural and trusting that everybody else is doing that too, but they're going to interplay
like,
correctly.
Yeah, like we're gonna, so like the commodification is, we're gonna create a business that does something in this space that has like this kind, like that's going after this market. And then we all have to sit down and think about like, okay, how would we go after this market with this like audience, versus let's constrain ourselves to what, I don't know what the constraints would be, and see what comes out. Like,
Yeah.
and then we could figure out market and audience, and trusting that there's value there. I don't know, that one like pushes against a lot of taught like instinct, like versus like what you're taught. So you're taught to just let things emerge. You're taught to like focus, go after the thing where you know that there's a gap in the market. Yeah. So there's probably some middle ground there. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it really makes me think of the conception of like scenius, I think is a pronunciation. Those like emergent sort of the bunch of periods throughout the Renaissance had these, and Silicon Valley, early Silicon Valley was this, where you just had the right collection of people all like having ideas bubble around, bounce into each other, and outcomes like productive. Nobody sat there and like said this pub is going to be where like this equation is going to be formed, but you had all the ingredients floating around. And I mean, what I'm also almost kind of picturing is if you just gave each one of those locations like an ambient, long-term like glue onto which to attach things and through which to find each other, both spatially and through time. And I guess it's not even geographically constrained now. You could just say it could just be an idea, or maybe like a thought, like a reference of something. I don't know, just a book. Like I have this book, I want to post my thoughts on it, and then sometime after that, like you don't have to like post it to your own blog, because definability just becomes so low. Like you require somebody to Google a book and then like look, it's just not going to happen. But if there was more like somewhere we could just pinpoint it and throw it into this ether, and then it's going to bounce up against somebody else who goes through that space, and then I guess over time the hope is that density there increases, and all of that can be taken and created into something, or just create like some sort of lively ongoing discussion. Like it doesn't, I guess, necessarily have to like come to an end and come to like something like a deliverable. It could be something everybody like synchronizes and comes and takes part of. But I get, like this focus is that you don't define it before you find it, and you just like kind of it forms itself, it finds itself. Maybe people scoot to, just naturally, I guess, are going to like scoot towards each other, and the software just needs to allow that and make space for that.
Yeah, the form has an inertia. It's flow based, like because relational information is flowing and changing based on overlap and this kind of thing. So the structures that inhibit this flow, that guide it, move it, constrain it, like in the current ecosystem, they're like apps, right? Like within this area, you can do these kinds of things with these sensors and this, this access to other people who have all agreed to be in an area, right? So the version of what we're talking about is more game-like, it's more play-centric, which requires a mentality of like a minimum mentality of like coming into the space, like using the software should work well if you are somebody for whom you wish to play, which is sort of coordinating your informational like being to be compatible with the level of play that you're comfortable with, whatever that looks like, right? So what we're kind of doing is collecting all of this information to structure a kind of like moldable self, right, in relation, because like this is the sort of social aspect of this network, right? There are these sort of, what you're doing is sharing how you think, like through these media, right? Or so in hopes to like clump up into a swarm to work on something like larger than yourself effectively. And there's sort of an innate meaning in this process. Yeah, so like the idea that you're collecting this information for yourself, right? To sort of, get a better view, and then it can move out into like designed networks to like, you know, sort of resurface it to audience, to people who might like, you know, match with you on this kind of thing, right? This is where the curation layer can come in. Like you have people who are good at like, all right, there's all these people making all this stuff out there. Like, let's make a magazine of it, right? Like it is a lens of a scene, right? But you know, so you could develop tooling and then offer that as like, here's a scene in a box, you know, or a framework or whatever to like help maintain all of the artwork that, and the idea that these things are going to live and die too. Like they are not permanent because they are grown. One of the standardization commodification things is that you try to keep it alive forever. It's like, yep. Because it's, you know, so these things have a life cycle. Anyway, so that's what's sort of coming up when you're talking about the interrelationship flow stuff that I'm hearing. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we're moving through the the concept of the form has an inertia. I think this is what you said, Dave.
It moves.
Yeah.
Like it's changeable, malleable.
Which those two, like form and flow, are sort of like two sides of the same coin, but they're different. Like.
Yeah, we're looking for a synthesis of those two things. Those are very, like, form is Aristotelian or Platonic, and flow is very, like, Confucian, Taoist, right? This idea of, like, a fixed quantity versus a stream of information, like, that is changing and moving. And so what is that? Whatever the like, meeting point of those two things is, like how information flows in networks and between people, I think. Or I think that we're headed in that kind of direction. You will see media types for which even the styles of, the predominant styles of thought that are smashing into each other on the internet are these Western, Eastern, like, mashups. So the media tooling or the media environment should represent that. And so a billion forms can bloom or whatever. Should we do your guys' stuff? I went on a rampage.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So the reason I brought up the form and flow, and I should make a note so I don't forget, I won't, but is we moved from like a super structured like project or like presentation, and then after a little bit of that form we started to flow with it and just let it go. So I was thinking about that, like there was some departure from the form, but we're still playing within the form. Yeah. And so there's a coming back now. I mean, there's a lot of wave like feeling to this stuff.
Yeah. There's a surfing aspect to it.
Flow, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the formal parts of the thing help like draw us back. There's a gravity, like, all right, so we maybe like start, especially me, I'll start fucking spinning out. By the way, if I ever do this, just yell at me and I'll stop. But yeah, then they can pull us back into sort of a different mindset through whoever
posts. Yeah, reference like little flags. Just you know, those little flags that like fold over when you drive over them, so you're not like knocking everything down, but you can still kind of know where the track is and the intended like group orientation.
All right, I can share mine. I don't know how much novelty is in here. We've like, it's interesting because we're definitely circling something right now. It's cool.
Parrots.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So what I did with Sharuz's posts was read through them, basically pulled out on the left-hand side here format of content within the post. So content types, I guess you would call them, anything that gave it form. So I counted like section breaks with lines because that was denoting something. The meta reflection, here's this little guy, links to related posts in a game, tabs, roll call was something specific. These three in here were specific, unique to Sharuz. And yeah, YouTube video embeds, tweet embeds, images, hyperlinks, highlighted text. So similar to what CJ was doing. And then I haven't looked at Dave's, but Dave's might have been similar. And then just for the sake of getting a feel for consistency and like frequency, I just noted which post this showed up in. I don't know that that's relevant. But then I also at the same time, I did some content analysis, but I tried to stay higher level. So I was sort of picking out pieces that resonated with me. And that was useful. So most of it was excerpts and then like just notes and questions that were coming up. Some of the excerpts I started highlighting or like adding little notations to them. And I think that's useful because there, I don't know how to explain this, but so I'll start at the beginning. So then after I did that, the first pass, I went through and started looking at what am I seeing as far as themes in my own thinking, like what's emerging from this sort of analysis. First of all, boundaries between objects or form of content. So how are we distinguishing between, like, some of these are pretty obvious, like text, like at what level is that? So are we talking sentence, paragraph? Is it blocks that are denoted by lines, line breaks? Images, hyperlink, these ones are obvious. Videos, tweets, like these are specific ones. So this is where the concept of a block like this has come up a bunch of times. And in like subtext, like moving the focus from like a post level to a block level. So that is important here, obviously. I think we want to get somewhat granular, and I think like we want it to be at the level more foundational than a post, but not so foundational that you're getting into like source code. You don't want people to have to root around in there. So there's some level of abstraction. And so you have, and this is where you've got these like component parts, building blocks, let's call them, whatever we decide that they are, and however they're denoted as their own entity, their own form. The original poster is using those building blocks to create a post, right? And then someone else comes in to read and then presumably curate, build on top of it. And at that point in time, the curator can take and create their own form on top of it. So they can play with whatever the content that's there as if it's their own without destroying what was made. So it's a non-destructive move. So there's some like fractal there for whatever the form types are, that everyone has access to all information in the system regardless of who owns the data. So you can go play with other people's stuff. So yeah, building blocks, but blocks feel very rigid and linear to me. So I don't know how to get around that. So it's like you want blocks, but in graph format. And so I kind of thought about Rome, but Rome, you don't get to operate in a graph structure. It's almost all in just it feels linear because it's still in like a, yeah, what's it called? Bullet points.
Document orientation.
Yeah. So yeah, levels of relations, like that's something that sort of bubbled up. So like some of the information that I thought was salient in Shrews's posts, I think that my sense is I want to retain relationship to Shrews's posts, but then I want to retain relationship to like a more specific aspect of the post. So yeah, I don't know how that happens, but like there's some higher level information. And then like I want to know that it was part of this game and that it was part of this like Buzzard thing. So there's this like zooming in and out. So yeah, I don't know if those are different forms then. I'm not sure how to think about that one. But yeah, the biology stuff makes the most sense to me. So a lot of what we're playing around with in my mind's eye, we're trying to define what the building blocks are, which are amino acids, and amino acids are made up of DNA. So I don't think we want to get into DNA because that's just like creating like a whole like new language. Like it seems like that's a lot. It's too much. But we're going to play with what we have on hand. So like I guess the DNA is just these existing like media types, or maybe the media types are amino acids. At any rate, you can piece together different amino acids, different types of things to create forms, right? So it's something with the building block. And when you create a form, that's a protein basically, and proteins can do all kinds of different things in the system. So they can be relational, they can just be a vehicle for information. They can have different functions where they do or enact things in the system. So this is still really fuzzy for me, but there might be something there that at least helps me understand the different levels of what we're doing.
Yeah, I really like the DNA metaphor, the protein sort of restructuring, like and the fact that this form has both. It's like a capsule for data, but it can also do something with that data, or do something to the capsule next to it, or perhaps like even just like link together with the capsules around it and understand where it is. Like something about that element, I didn't see it like that before, but yeah, like I like that like stackability and remixability.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like one thing, I didn't get into it too much, but I was like, what do proteins do? Like just remind myself. And they do like everything. So they can create like structure and form, but they do that in all kinds of different ways. So they can cause, like they can instantiate like a chemical reaction too. They can transport information. So I'm like, okay, so they're like all of the things. Like we're made of proteins, which is kind of cool because they can be just like, yeah. I mean, it can be the structure, but it also can be flow, like is what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a really cool parallel there. Duality.
So, but yeah, I mean, this feels very similar to what we've been talking about. It doesn't feel, I don't know that there's anything super novel here, which is kind of cool. Like we're playing in the same sandbox.
I also like that you pointed out that you want to know, like, looking at a post is different from the fact that you're looking at post 7 of 10 is different from the fact that you're looking at game 4 submission to post 7 of 10.
Yep.
Those all have like explicit, like maybe like space for reflection, or just like you may like want to write something at each of those unique levels.
Yep. And I think too, like if you were making a commentary on someone else's post within the system, that's different than making a commentary on someone else's blog post from an external source.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like, again, like it's like the lensing stuff where you could filter things to like see only internal like comments or only external comments, or show me only commentary that's happened on Wikipedia or only on like a certain site, or it could be, yeah, only show me comments on videos like that. Yeah.
For needing to differentiate between generic or unique media types, is the purpose or the value of differentiation more on the querying side of being able to kind of quickly aggregate things from a certain source? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I was writing in my notes from today, the definitional stuff is like popping up to me a lot today. So metadata, like what does metadata mean? Because metadata can be like, I feel like we're leaning heavy towards metadata. Like there's like almost all variable information on posts is like a form of metadata kind of thing. But yeah, like it doesn't really matter that it's a YouTube video unless you're trying to find like commentary on YouTube videos or yeah.
I think it's a redefinition of meta to include context more so, like or a deeper meaning of context, not just a machine context. So like there is a relational quality to the metadata, so that when it is meta as between, as you know, or something like this.
Yeah, because like I don't think it really matters that it's a YouTube video per se. Like if I'm making something, I'm creating something, it just happened to be from YouTube, like where that like source of information. So I think what I'm struggling with is where do we encode certain information at what level? Like
yeah.
How transparent is it? Like how visible is it? I think it's like UI stuff. Like what does it look like when you're looking at this information? And like how are you building a post or a form? Like I'm imagine playing with building blocks and like what the blocks look like. And then it goes on the query side too. How do I query it? And then creating a post like fresh is ultimately the same as curating on top of someone else's post. So in that sense, like it doesn't, like what matters? Yeah. What about the content matters is what I keep coming up against. And I don't, it feels super vague right now, which I'm like.
This is, so it's down to the scene to determine that. Like the thing that we're playing, or I'm playing generally in, is the kinds of generic relationships that would allow people to make a decision about what you just said. Like,
sure.
You know, like you can sort of, and we can model it for ourselves. Like, what would we need to see in a particular form to help us, you know, like what do we need exposed? What do we need to collect, right? And then what can we do with it once we have it, right? Like, and there are certain things where we can be, you know, we can sort of take the data from like, this is where the games help. And then you do sort of a content analysis thing. And like, what were we missing here? Like where were the like insane frustrations or whatever? And then this is where having like sort of side conversations about what is possible engineering wise and display wise, like all of those things, if they're happening in concert, you can start to bubble up some interfaces on the thing, I think. Because like, you know, this exercise that we're doing right now, like each of us sort of produced a different visualization like of the media, and then we're creating a meta visualization, which is like doing a conversational dialogue based, you know, lightly structured sync with a sort of non-standard presentation model. Okay, that's a form. And that form might be good for certain kinds of things. If it is good enough, like if it produces a lot of results, then let's make a form maker, right?
Yep.
Like where you can click a button and it goes tick, 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 and everybody gets invited, and you know where to put your stuff, and like what can you make easier in that process to make it more likely that you do them frequently, because they're a good sort of conversational glue technique.
Good form. Yep.
Yeah. So, but if you have the information in there and you have the ability to do this without having to manually pull everybody together, it's more likely to happen. And then, yeah, that's the hope. You just have to believe.
Wow.
Wait, Dave, I'm so curious. I don't know why this reminded me, but it kind of goes back to the thing you were saying all the way at the very start of the call, that you kind of did this very last minute, and it made me think, what if there was no, like, this call could only be scheduled once all the submissions were in a way, like where would the timeline kind of then fall?
Yeah, then it's more of
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just getting into game rules. Would we know when other people had checked stuff in, or would we all find out when everybody was done?
Oh, both of those
That's
are
an important
interesting.
distinction.
Yeah.
Because if I knew other people were doing it, I'm way more likely to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's more of one of those like oh gosh, I'm not even sure what it's like that Dark Knight scene where they all had like the remotes on 3 boats, and like there's like this tension and you just don't know, but obviously like once the thing kicks off, like everybody knows, but it also removes pressure because you don't know, like if the other people if there's like 4 out of people waiting but nobody knows who's waiting. I think like I've seen this mechanism in some video games in like lobbies and stuff where putting who is remaining will like put a lot of pressure. Like I think Drawful does this where they're like, the last person drawing, and then literally you have like this like social dynamic. People start punching that person. There's like, hurry up, like all of us are waiting. It's like, how do you like pull that element of it back, but still have like this flexibility? And I guess there's also something interesting about the last person submitting and just like firing off a bunch of stuff, and maybe like giving them more responsibilities, like not responsibilities, but
it's
is
weighted
there a way
in some way?
Like, all right, you get to intro everybody, or you get to like schedule it now, because you were the last one, not as a punishment, but as an incentive for everybody else to get like scooped faster. It's like the conch. Getting handed it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different mechanisms. Like, you're also there's like a reward mechanism that like if there's something that you all are curious about, then you're staking it to make it happen, and then once everybody is in and it's sort of approved, then the stake is released with some, this is where interest is possible or something like this. Like, this, I mean, this is how the staking mechanisms are working. Like you are getting paid in some way for the contribution of effort. And then the benefit of collaborative effort is an emergence. Like you're convincing each other to do this by enacting the thing. It's cool. Yeah, there's a bunch of different, like, like then you could weight these things too for like a short term. If you're trying to motivate, like, so this is a gas pedal of sorts. Like there's sort of motivational techniques or like sort of pressure dynamics for production, like pipelining, right? So this is if you have like a sort of game protocol thing, this is the kind of stuff that you expose, and then people can be like, we made a horrifying widget. And like if you put anybody through it, they will make 200 posts in an hour guaranteed. Yeah. Okay, that's fun.
guess I can go up next if that's
Yeah.
what we're doing. Cool. So I reread the rules that Kristen had posted, and I may have taken them a little too literally in some aspects. And I definitely took the presentation implication and then posted it as a markdown file. So I used, I also kind of just wanted to figure out what this thing was. So there's let me share my screen. Cool. So it's all written in Markdown, but I'm using this tool called MDX Deck, which I just installed locally. I didn't check in, but that lets me just run this command down here, which runs MDX Deck on my file. So I'm going to run that. And then this is popping open a browser.
CJ.
I think I've seen this before, and I'm like, oh, now I actually see it get like used live.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it before. Let me refresh. So the format itself looks like a markdown file, which is nice. So I could check that in to the repo as per the rules. And then, I also took the metadata aspect maybe too literally, and I focused on the internal metadata. So John had put at the top of his posts, these kind of lists of tags and then values. So for example, for the voice recording and transcription post, included the type, but then also included a lot of metadata that's kind of only applicable if you are uploading media that is a voice recording or a video or something along those lines, like length, size. He also did stuff with location and proximity to other people. And then move this over. So similar to front matter, I mentioned front matter in one of my posts too, but I'm not sure we're using it, but I'm not sure how familiar the vocabulary is already. Should I get into it or?
I mean,
okay,
Kristen,
real quick.
Yeah.
At the top of our markdown files already, where we do like post or like layout, I think, and then put the tags in.
Yeah.
So that's front matter, which is like the native markdown extension for any kind of metadata. So there's some standards that we already have now, which are like those layouts and dates and stuff. But anything could be popped into there, and then any rendering engine, any client can just read those. So that includes stuff that John was doing, locations and post types and stuff. But with John putting the like a leading dash in front of it, that meant that it wasn't interpreted by front matter, and instead the user could read it, which obviously has different kind of values, different. Now we could read it instead of the machine reading it. Some tags were consistent in every post type, so he included a type and a series in each one. The series were just what post number it was within the game. Some tags can presumably be applied to any post, location, people nearby, what tool you use to write that post or create that post in. And then some tags only apply when you're doing certain post types like duration, file size. Used 9 unique post types across 10 posts, with the geo photo reflection being used twice. One of the interesting things here was trying to interpret if these were kind of like free-form post types being written out, or if they were kind of like pulled from a glossary of like, here's reusable things, and maybe writing this in has some interpretation that happens elsewhere. That maybe there's a UI that gets pulled in when you're doing a voice recording that says, hey, do you want to include the length and the file size? And you just say yes or no, or you type it in yourself. Or so I was just trying to like understand, because there's also some overlap of like text post versus reply post versus meta text, and how much overlap is there? Are there subsets of post types and kind of like rules that get applied both on the writing and the reading side by setting one? Are there, or are they completely unique kind of like branches or forks of something, where a reply post may be originated with the text post format being copied and defined, but has its own kind of additional permutations that now anybody can get? Or are they actually still somehow functionally related within some graph database somewhere? And that level of things is navigable by people too. John also put navigation. So this was outside of the top block that was the stuff that I covered previously. So at the bottom of each post, or almost every post, I think it was outside of one of them, but I wasn't sure if that was intentional or just because you had to put them in manually?
Probably in this app.
Cool. So the formatting's consistent, but the content is dynamic. So on every single post, there would be, here's a link to the previous post with that title. Here's the title of the current post that you're reading, and then here's the title of the next post. So one of the questions that I had there was like, is that something that is more, you know, fun and permissive if you let people write out the stuff in Markdown natively themselves and define it? Or is it kind of frustrating to have to manually do that? And if you change a title elsewhere, you got to come back and update that title and, you know, any other post that's referencing it. How much of that should be automated and versus handwritten? And then both, again, functionally, because I'm just thinking about engineering stuff, like, is it Markdown or is it metadata? Is it something where you're writing it out and kind of placing it exactly where you want to be? Or is there an assumption that wherever you're posting, it's going to get interpreted and you can just include a flag, like a include footer navigation equals true at the top, and somewhere, so you know, something will know, all right, John wanted to include footer navigation, so let me add those links in dynamically at this point. Whether that's at the publishing time and it gets locked in, or if it's on the client read time and it happens dynamically, so you're moving these things around elsewhere. Just like some of these, like how much should be handwritten and human consumable versus how much should be automated and just kind of like a convenience factor that people may come to expect from software nowadays. And like I said, I just focused on the internal metadata, so I'm a little light on content, but happy to flesh it out too if that's helpful. But yeah, that's all I got.
Good.
Yeah, it's useful. It's actually good that you had John, because his post type specifically, and then the navigational thing, like you did something similar, Shrews, but it was related and it was less like backwards forwards. And I'd forgotten that John did that, which yeah, it was kind of fun because it felt like it was part of a book then. So then it wasn't just a post, but like, yeah. Some posts, yeah.
Yeah, this is where like there's some quantity of the like, so there are relational navigational patterns like that within, you know, so say for instance, you put something in a series, you manually do it, it's 1 through 10, right? Like there's an inherent navigation to that. You could also have like something that spit out like a navigable structure that's like anything within this time range, right? Or this location, you know, like it could be query centric or something like that. So these little templates of navigability or whatever. Yeah, like the hand coding versus having that barfed up based on machine intuition or something. Yeah, I'm trying to think about the flow of actually building these things and like what the surfaces would be like. Like for me, I prefer a point and click interface. I'm just faster that way. And so like if these things are available as like primitives on a canvas, obviously, and you're like sort of tossing together a document or something, and then like without this becoming like super publishing based. I guess it could be though, like, because we've got HTML and CSS and all this other stuff, and you can do all this, but you have to, all the relationship management, like actual structure and dynamism between pages all has to be manually built. So even if you were to expose more types of like, yeah, portaling and all that stuff, that would be a huge boon to these things. Like you would be able to create like pretty complex little webs. Yeah, I don't know if I'm trotting on already shred surface here or something. Yeah.
Like to me, it felt like there's kind of like some tension there in terms of like how much should be handwritten versus, and then there's also some points where it felt very like obvious of like GPS location. If John wants to include that, he shouldn't have to like handwrite out or copy it out, or like tagging Dave and Kristen. Ideally, that's just like an @ symbol and typing in, you know, the name and it auto completes and tags it correctly instead of copy pasting the URL and all that. Yeah.
Okay.
Like some
Yeah,
of
I
those
guess
things
it's-
don't seem
yeah.
like they have a cost in terms of
No,
like, yeah.
I guess it's more like, yeah, fancier queries or something like this, like that you're building on the fly. And Yeah.
Yeah, but you could like, what did you call it, Shrew's? The like a glossary.
Mhm.
This is where you have the potential of doing like, it's like packs of building materials basically, and you can go for like the basic pack and it gives you just like core functionality, and then like I create a pack for people who are super into like qualitative like analysis, and so it has some interesting functions that build on the starter pack, so it's glomming a few of the starter pack things together into one so that you could just pull that off the shelf. But you can make your own packs too, and people can trade in them. You can sort of pick the level of, yeah, how much customization though. Like everything can be customizable, and then there's like markets for everything. Then I don't know how
Yeah.
much is too much.
I mean, this develops as you go. Like the likelihood that we're
Yeah.
going to barf out something that's super useful, that you would have enough people to be able to do this at all. Like it's possible that there is a structure in here that, like, if we can get this thing working, the value is very immediate. So like it also, the larger surface area to get or the easier it is to get content into a system like this, the more people can, and the higher the network value, right?
Yep.
Up to a certain point, because like we're sort of, because of the nature of the depth of the relationships we're capturing, there is an upper limit on the number of people in a successful network, probably, because the thing will just get so radically complex that like you just, it's too much, like you'll be overwhelmed. Or that's a force function for people to create tooling to try and like, because they want to push out into the like 3,000 member, that's fine. Okay. There's a natural like curiosity engine built into that. We're basically talking about trying to seed that, right? With the like smallest little information garden network thing, like with a sort of, I don't know if it's like a markup language kind of thing, if that's the interface, or if it's, some taggable thing like the dude did with the subtext, like, or if we're creating a little like sort of remixable UI, damn it, that require copy and paste as the, like it's like a zine to start, right? Like there's no GUI that you can drag around and stuff. But yeah, if we can get primitives and you can put them into like you can dump them in there real quick and they render out, that's fun. Maybe there's a simple language like that. I don't know.
I think one thing, like, I mean, to some extent, like I, if this can be done in a markup language, I think that would be like really cool. But at the same time, I'm also in a lot of these senses, I'm like, I want a canvas view or a text view, or I want like both on the same piece of data, but it's like different for what's going on. Like if I'm like taking a YouTube video and then like doing annotations on the YouTube video or something, is like, well, that's like doing that linearly is helpful to some degree in time, but what about other connections that I want to bring in from outside? Because like that's connected to something else. Like where is that coming from? How do I query for that thing and say, okay, it's really connected to this like outside block, but this is like its own self-contained space, and that is like what's forming it. But even within the self-contained space, there's these like smaller individual blocks, but they're really part of like a bigger namespace. And I think the namespace kind of came a few times back to me, just in terms of defining internal versus external. Is this is really part of like that namespace, but it is relevant here. And even in terms of navigation, maybe is saying like, oh, these things do belong together in some space.
Yeah, I mean, it's back to like the protein stuff that Kristen was talking about, membranes. Like there is, I mean, I think that there's a strong possibility that if we get a data structure here, like the path to moving that stuff around in relationship to a visual like layout is not that far, right? Like, you know, if you can spit them out as like some type of object or some type of, you know, navigational like pattern that can create a static site, right? Like, okay, there's your form. And then those things have like location data on a canvas or something, and then that's just XYZ coordinates. That's easy enough. So there is something, and then like the nearness approximation, there's like an edit layer to that kind of thing that you like, you know, this is the simplistic version. They're all on a canvas. You hit edit, and then now you're editing, and then you can put annotations near them and stuff like this, and record when that happened and where you're at and all this other stuff. So, you know, this can be a form that could be linked to other stuff, and I can see that being possible if this thing is compelling enough to get a bunch of goofballs to come play. Like the number of people I know that can build interfaces like this, if they had a compelling reason to do it, like they can build. I mean, people can build crazy shit these days. So, and then if you open that, yeah. So, but I don't know how that coordination works. I think it has to be gameplay based, right? Like, because if you do a standing invite to get, how are they coming to interact with this thing at all, right? Like, you could do it open source, but like, I don't know. I don't think the incentive structure is there to do it. So, especially for the people who like to play with these like really fancy visualizations, they're in such high demand. I mean, they're out there. There are people. I don't know. I think that recruiting from the like consumer world, where there's all these people doing all this insane work, and they love to do it, but give them a place to play with this stuff, we could get pretty bonkers interfaces. This is where the lore and sort of dream comes in. I'm going to continue to believe that that is possible.
You just have to believe. You said earlier.
You have to believe. Yeah, so in the short term, yeah, where do we go? All right, we got all this.
Well,
this
has to go.
This may be a good
John has to
segue
go.
to my analysis, which like kind of definitely touches on some of these themes.
Great.
Let's see. There we go. Yeah, I'll see all right.
Yep.
Great. So, started with the notebook. Well, first put them all in my windows and just like read through them one by one. Initially I just like ordered them by type, but then I also like reordered them by the number, like when they were the actual file name. And then one more I didn't really think about was like organizing by date. All of those were like somewhat different and changed how I like perceived the content itself when it was like next to similar sibling post types. But we have a couple doodles, we have a couple free writing, and I took this stuff and kind of pulled it out into Markdown to make it clear. So free write entries, we had 5 of these. This was just plain Markdown text, presumably copied from Bear. We had a couple explicit metadata tags near a list of people, near a location, referenced by name, not by coordinates, presumably much easier. And the date existed in the title. And what I kind of, I guess, although it may make sense to go back to observations because they all tie in together. So next we had Doodles, which you guys all probably saw. There were 2 of these, again, Markdown plus image. There was like a little bit of metadata. We had the doodle number, and just the fact that I think maybe one of them had a date, maybe not. Then we had a YouTube annotations post. There were 2 of these. Markdown plus YouTube embedded video. That was really the only, I guess, metadata I could really extract out of that post. But one of them had kind of an intro like context section, which I found was like again, I think Kristen, you mentioned earlier, like trying to decide whether that's metadata, whether it's not, and I went with yes, because it like is telling me how to orient to this data that I'm about to consume, but is obviously data in and of itself. And then finally we had the sketch mapping, which was a picture. So the Doodles were like straight from I think your iPad app, but the sketch maps, yep, were a photo of something physical, which was interesting. And on that metadata, we had like maybe a caption and the number of the page, presumably. So some interesting things across these post types. Like one of these was from an archive. I'm kind of wondering like how that, I mean, it like that was important, I think, to note. I think it did change how I read it a little bit, because I was like, okay, like this was pulled from the past, so I shouldn't try to place it like near our recent conversations. But then I kind of got to thinking like very little is posted real time as well, and so if something is posted from yesterday, it's kind of from the archive as well. Yet it's also kind of real time because I'm like posting this thing from the past at this moment. So trying to navigate between those two perspectives is really weird for me, because there's no real time and there's no like actual like past. It's kind of like both. This is just some basic. It was very stream of consciousness, so you kind of like had to read the whole thing to rock it. But once you did it, it felt like I could like place it, and there were like specific sections that you could definitely pull out, but it was very much like a thing that opened, and then like there were like lots of threads, but they all like originated from somewhere, which feels a little different to like, I guess, like my post types, where it was like much more linear. Like, yeah, I think your free writing things like tend to like branch a lot, and I think for me, I find that comfortable in a linear interface, but I definitely did almost want to like kind of scoop them apart to see threads and like almost like zoom into parts. For the doodle, just the fact that it has a number, there's like a lot of other ones. It would be interesting to see the ones before. There's a bit of that like sequence element here, and they're very visual, but they have text within. So again, what is that? Is it like if it's handwritten text within an image, like that's still text, but it's not like, do we slap OCR on there? That could be like an interesting way to sort of understand what's inside. The annotations, no time code. So this is a lack of metadata, one might say. Like I found this interesting, because it sort of turned it from a like thing of a bunch of bookmarks to almost a generalized summary. Like I think I watched one of these videos a couple of months prior, and just reading your annotations was just like, holy like such a high like information density, because it was like I could follow, but it was clear that it was just really only the important stuff, and it didn't really have opinions on when in the video it happened, apart from relationally. This happened after that. So I was less distracted by where exactly in the video it was, and what was the specific transcript like text around that. However, that also makes me wonder, like, would it be interesting to see this overlaid over like a timeline, something like an Otter interface? Is that useful for you in generating annotations versus is that useful for me to see these annotations? Or like the answer to one might not be the other. And yeah, one of these had the intro section that was really cool. I think that definitely like it. The lack of it on the other one almost made it feel like I want I want to know now. Like I want to know how this made you feel, and like what like the second order reaction to this media was. And yeah, I mean, just seeing the physicality of the sketch mapping, it's really nice. And like the structure of your sketch map, I mean, just had like the vaguest I guess parallels to how I kind of saw all of your content, and I like really almost like would want some like map to navigate it that way. So this is where I think I kind of left the game definition, the strict one, and I really like started just trying to like see what was like spinning around here. So there was like kind of two buckets that I saw, and again, this is like bleeding more into content as well. So again, like really what is content, what is metadata. We had some very raw stuff where it was like the YouTube, like just like I'm not like making a statement about this information. I'm just like sort of channeling it onto a surface and capturing it and like leaving it here for later. And then there was some, this other bucket of stuff where it was a little more like formulated, and you could see that it was now being connected to many other past things and recent conversations, and just like kind of threading. There's a little bit of like this coming together of the threads of thought, and it required more context in some sense. Like I could send the annotations to a friend and they would only care about the YouTube video and they would get it, but like it would be harder to send one of these posts because it like has these dependencies that is implicit like upstream things. And so to me, it kind of felt like there was this opening for something approaching like a hybrid of the two, where it allows like a central textual theme, but it allows you to essentially like harden it and like support it with these external things that you like have already interacted with in the online and offline world. Again, like physicality versus digital, but you can essentially start like seeing these things from both sides. And I have like left pane, right pane here, just like just very, very basic, but like a primary like sort of text thing that I'm reading, but then augment my understanding of it with like things I've seen from the past and things that might help understand what is actually being presented here. I'm imagining, that synthesis post type is probably long form, but it might be audio first, because I think like, especially you have like a very natural sense of, like a single person podcast episode kind of is the realm I'm imagining. But again, like maybe with a transcription, maybe not. Maybe it was just like only a high level outline that helps you like really just jump forward and backward, but still like pin things together to where you want them. And like podcast notes, maybe it's for like a section. Maybe there is no specific timestamp that you can place, but you're just like this first half, speaks to things I have seen in this other media, and so now you can kind of see that relationship from both sides. I think that's the gist of it. Yeah, just something about transclusion, something about like these panes, these sliding Andy Matuszek's notes, just kind of seeing a lot of those patterns potentially here. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it. At any rate, it was really interesting to like put all this stuff together, because I'm like it felt also, I guess there was one element here that I didn't really write, but I was like part of some of these conversations, and so and sometimes I would see references to myself and I'm like so like I may have had posts that I wrote that were like sort of reflecting these, and it's like I'm almost like not seeing the whole picture, even though I said to myself, I'm reading all of Dave's posts, right? Like that was the assignment here, but it's almost as if like to read all of Dave's posts, I actually need to read all of the posts, and to really get like every angle here. And so, yeah, the references and the people and sort of the neighborhood of the content that I'm reading, like who else was associated with it? What were they doing? What were they writing at that moment? It might not matter. It might be completely unrelated, but like the fact that there was these other people, it sort of lends itself to the relational side of it. Yeah, that's it.
So one thing that you said that's bringing up like the trust layers is I'm getting this like Zettelkasten sort of vibe of moving things through like a system until it reaches like final form eventually. But like the first filter is sort of like summarization, like I read this thing and this is what I'm taking from it, and the next one is like this makes me think about these things, and then the next like version is I have a theory about this stuff and it's based on like the past. So it's like a compounding thing. So process wise, that's another potential piece of metadata when we get in like further along, like how far along is the thinking in this post or the content in this post? Is this like a first draft?
Yeah,
like,
maturity.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And that probably comes into play for both group and individual creation process. Yeah. That was novel. I wasn't expecting that to pop out. I was like, oh, weird.
Actually, it's so interesting that you bring that one up too, because I think that like maturity level, in a way, it made me think of like a thing versus an object, where you know, if you started out, it initially starts out more object like, but as it moves through time and becomes more mature, it becomes more thing like. And in a way, I was thinking even just like words kind of evoke some level of thingness to words themselves, is like they've like allowed so much, a lot to be collapsed inside of just a set of syllables, or what, you know, whatever they're called, phonemes, or so I thought that was kind of interesting, that that distinction between like initial versus like long term, and there's like a lot more floating around in there.
Yeah, there's something to the folding stuff here, like, or what I call folding. It just basically passes on content. Like, you know, like you produce something, stream, or I do, stream of consciousness, or, you know, from the ether, or from a conversation, or you know, and then you go back through it again, and the likelihood is that it's shorthanded in some way, or the logic is like a seed for something bigger, or you've already written it, or whatever. So like there's a sort of folding thing there. You need to move it on top, you know, just shuffle it around and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. Part of the annotation stuff, like I use some of these videos as a like mechanism to jumpstart thinking within a certain area, or like I'm just sort of, I'm like working with people, like getting, it's a conversational style of like writing, I guess. So like I open up a video, it's within a certain like genre, or like style of thinking that is like compatible with the like sort of vein that I'm working with. And the more complex the thinker is, the more it'll like, I can sort of mimic that, or a little, or like work against it. And sometimes I'm just studying the style of thought, because like in there's like the way that people combine stuff or whatever. So what happens is, like, my annotations, depending on how long the thing, might not start for like half an hour, because I need to get into the like zone with the person thinking. And like I tend not to write during that. I'm just like sort of working it out. Like, okay, where are they coming from? Who am I in relationship to this media or this style of thought? And then stuff will start clicking in relationship to where my current thought is, especially if it is something for which is top of mind or is relevant to, you know. So this is just sort of me, like, this can definitely happen if I watch back through one of our videos, like after like a few weeks, because we have these active threads, and I'm just redoing the conversation with you guys with whatever new context I have now. And so what comes out are insights, or, you know, stuff like that.
Okay, what do we do next is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how do we take I feel like we should, my like instinct is to try to coalesce around some kind of like content building blocks that are organized into something's blocks, posts, like start trying to nail down that stuff and how they might relate. Then like playing around with how they might relate, I think, is a bigger project. But like, can we talk, like, about what the foundational pieces are. The amino acids that can be used to build proteins, the building blocks that can be used to build posts, I guess.
So you're talking about defining the blocks.
Yes. Because we've just identified, like, we've been spending a bunch of time looking at each person. Here's how I saw what the blocks were, basically. These things went into like building a post, and they varied across different people in these ways, and like we each have a different take, but can we all agree on some subset of like building blocks? I don't think we need to talk about that right now, but can that be a project for next steps? I don't, does that make sense, first of all?
I mean, it's a place we can go. Like it seems like it's a proposal of a type.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, to me, this seems like resonant or like quite similar to the question is like, what is the data structure in a way?
Yeah.
I think these questions are very interrelated.
Yeah, like for me, it was interesting. Like I didn't spend too much time on content with Sharuz's posts, but I couldn't help but like, because it's more technical than everybody else's, I would say. And like, because it stayed in that like pathway, the whole 10 posts, I got into this mindset where I'm like, okay, like we're not that far. Like there feels like there's form, and then I want to make form, so I might be influenced by this, but it also feels like I have the sense of wanting to play in code more, like, so, but how do we codify? Like what would be the base element of what we're codifying? And I think it would be building blocks. We don't have to put anything into code yet, but like this would be a first step towards getting there.
I like the idea of trying to at least, yeah, like start sketching some like very, very like repeated patterns, you know, things we're seeing come up again, like try to maybe abstract them away. But I guess one proposal I have for the event itself is possibly to do it synchronously instead of async, so that we really like we feel those frictions and we resolve them like at a much more
I think
rapid
that's a good
pace.
idea.
Agreed.
Yep. Yep. Because what I was thinking immediately, like, so the little spec I did like has a jump off point for a block spec. And like, so I've done this particular exercise a few times in my last company. And there's a lot of little dammits in the thing, like, you know, all the different media types sticking together, all the different, you know, so like, being able to team that would be good. Yeah, that's cool. I never had a chance to do that. I was just sitting there on a fucking piece of paper trying to, and it would scroll away from me every time, because it's so complex. So cool. Yeah. What do we need to bring to this? Our minds?
Yeah, your brain. I mean, any thinking that you want to do, like based on this conversation, based on, and like I think all of us that didn't post markdown files, which I'm one of them, should post something about what they did for this analysis, just so we have everything in one place as a reference point. So if you wanted to, you could go look through that stuff if you feel it necessary. But I don't know that
Sure, that's fine.
there's much homework for this one.
Yeah,
Play work.
I think.
In your brain.
That works. I can achieve that over the next week.
Sharuz, you were muted.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. Quick question. How are we defining a block? Because I think there's some range there still too.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the question. A block, you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that we even want to talk about that word.
Yeah.
What is a block? Yeah. I think
metaphorically. Because my version of it right now is like, you know, sort of remixable, composable media entity that is part of a pipelined process, but okay, that are intermixable and have like some basic data structure that allows them to be stacked and related and put into interface and
Cool.
yeah.
So is a stack of blocks also a block? Like, could we look at our posts that we've already done as like they're both a block in themselves, but also if you broke it out, that's also a block? I might be getting too far, but
Yeah,
No, I
like
think
what's
that's
the
the kind of
difference
thing that we.
between block and post, right? Like
yeah.
how often do things roll up into
Well,
something? Yeah.
Well, and
Which-
when is a post a block in a series of
Yes.
other, right? It's I don't know. Is it blocks all the way down?
Yeah,
it's
one
all
of
the way
these
down.
things is we started playing with this in Ponder, adding a maturity lineage to these things can help. So like a block can start as like a more simple organism, and then with the addition of relationship and metadata, which are equivalent, they can complexify, and then maybe there is some emergence into a post. I don't know. So I think those are the kinds of things that we can like play with. Like, all right, so we've got title, or maybe we don't have title, and then like what is the folding or growth or whatever it is, like processing that attaches more relationship, and then what does that stuff look like? Maybe we can play out one of those things or something. Yeah, that's how I'd fool with this, but there's probably other metaphors to play with here too. Well, obviously, but. Cool.
Any thoughts on where this would take place?
Yeah, what medium?
My proposal to make both the text and the visual crowds happy is to have like maybe 2 documents up at the same time, like a Google Docs thing and a FigJam, and not require any like hard like interlinking between them. But if there's something just feels more natural, throw it to the left side. Otherwise, map it out on the right side, and maybe things can go back and forth even. But just to avoid like locking us into any one sort of dimension.
Yeah, I think it's good to role play the sort of capture of this thing in a pseudo canvas, even though it's going to be clunky, but we get the general idea. Yeah, cool.
Cool.
When do we want to do this?
Yep.
Our usual slot.
Works for me.
Good with me.
Yep.
Cool. So also, like, I'm probably going to start posting to the repo again. I don't know where, but because I've been enticed into something. I don't. I want to play with more of these forms to see if anything makes sense there. But we'll see if I actually do that.
What did we say last time that we weren't going to post for a while? What was?
I think we sort of left it like, if you want to, go for it. If not, whatever. But I think more about if you guys start posting, I probably will. It's one of those. I'm more likely to. Not that that's it's a subtle whatever the hell it is.
A nudge.
Sure.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's an activated invitation. But yeah. Are you coming down, CJ?
Yeah, I'll be coming down Friday through Sunday, probably. Maybe Monday I'll be there. We'll see.
Okay.
Cool.
Kind of just depends on how things go. If it feels like it's right to stay another day, stay another day. Just play it by ear.
It's good to live free, you know?
Yeah. If the surf is good, especially, then like there's a good chance.
I mean, possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
We'll see. We'll bring the surfboard and see what happens.
Bring a towel too. We have a slight shortage of towels here. Not a shortage.
A towel.
A shortage that would happen with additional members.
Okay, that's fine. I can bring a towel. That's no worries.
It's a bring your own towel kind of scenario here.
Yeah,
We're
BYOT, got it.
Yeah, we're not wealthy.
Towel
Hang it
poor.
on. Yeah. Well, we have exactly what we need.
Yeah.
I
There
think
you
we
go.
Yeah, I
have
mean,
one extra one. So if Nancy and CJ come at the same time, then what happens?
Okay, I'll make sure she knows to bring an extra towel too.
See, we're working it all out. Teamwork.
Teamwork. Sweet.
Cool. Well,
it
another
sure
one
is.
in,
I mean, also if
yeah.
you're up for a drive down to Mexico from LA, which is
Yeah, I really want to, but I don't think I'll have time this month. It's
Okay.
getting hectic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How's hectic? Good hectic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
We should
Like
catch up
work
about
stuff,
that soon.
projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Well, for now though, I'm gonna eat since stuff eats up energy like crazy.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know.
Yeah, I started getting hungry like an hour and a half through, and I was like, I just had lunch. This is interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't had lunch yet, so yeah.
Oh yeah,
Ready.
you need
Very
to
ready.
eat.
Cool. But all right.
All right.
Always a delight.
All right,
Next week.
Yeah. Peace.
bye.